Well, thank you so much for the invitation. I mean, it's a pleasure to be here. It's my first time I'm doing something like this, so work with me on the technical side if I screw something up. But I'm really excited to get to know all of you guys, the regulars on the group. So, in the startup presentation, I'll talk a little bit about myself to get for you guys to get to know me. Before we get started on that, though, I would like to run a little poll and try to understand, what do you guys want to learn about Kaizen and Lean, in case I get to a point in the presentation that I can maybe go deeper on it or answer some questions. So, Nayli, if you don't mind running that little poll for me.
There we go. And link us on the chat. Mm-hmm.
We'll try to uncover customer value through this poll.
If you're just joining, we are running a poll to see if there is anything related to Kaizen, I think, or Lean you would like for Ricardo to explain. This is the time for you to express yourself. We would like to know, if you have questions, we can cover that.
Got it. So how to conduct one, strategies, what's Kaizen about, quick Kaizen maybe a history of it. Okay, all right. What's in the mindset? Okay. All right, the elements of it. What's a Kaizen event? Okay. How many days does it take? How Agile relates to Kaizen, very good. All right, okay. Kaizen fatigue. All right, cool. All right, let's see if we can hit some of these as we go through the presentation. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your thoughts. We still got some more coming?
A little bit.
Yeah, anti-patterns. Somebody wrote
dictators. All right.
Yeah, I like the anti-pattern one.
I like that you like my proposals. I'm the one with the dictators, fatigue, and anti-patterns.
Okay, so thank you for throwing those things in there and see what we can make with all of that. Okay, so I guess I need to share my presentation. Is that the case? All right, let me see. Again, bear with me. Hopefully we can. Let me know if you can see my presentation.
We can see it.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, my name is Ricardo Villeda. I have a little consulting practice that I started, a few years ago, and I help mostly manufacturing companies, deal and improve their operations as it deals with metrics related to delivery and cost and quality. And I do a lot of this Kaizen activity. So, so this would be, I thought it might be an interesting topic for me to share some of the surrounding ideas around Kaizen. So, let me see. So again, one of the things I want to do is I want you guys to, I want us to get to know each other. I'd like to connect more with the South Florida Agile Association and the practitioners, the Agile practitioners down in Florida. That's where I live now. I originally was born in El Salvador in Central America. It's a beautiful place, full of water and mountains and volcanoes. I love it there. But as I was growing up, I wanted to come to the States to find out, hey, how do these great companies run their businesses? That was something that intrigued me. So I got a scholarship to come study industrial engineering here, and I graduated from Georgia Tech. After school, I had the opportunity to work for a consulting company that what they did was they built new manufacturing capacity abroad, as well as improved manufacturing capacity that existed in the States. So we would go and look at a business and help them become better manufacturers there. I spent quite a few years living out of 2 big suitcases and a few boxes full of books. So I know what it's like. I had to give a speech to a group and talk about change management. And I started to count how many times I had literally moved with everything from one place and moved somewhere else to live for a few months there. And I had done that 22 times. So a lot of travel, a lot of that. So I now live in South Florida. I have a small family. We enjoyed all the beautiful things that South Florida has for us. You know, we love going to the parks, love going to the beach, and love to travel. It's a great place, to take off and go somewhere else. Enjoy the Bahamas, for example. So a little bit about where I worked. I worked in a pretty diverse set of industries. I've been lucky to have contributed improving the operations of companies that work in a number of different spaces. I worked making, light fixtures and electronic components. I worked in the automotive sector. I worked in the apparel and textile industry. I worked with Lowe's, helping them improve their supply chain, as well as help, get their merchandising working for their Mexican facilities. I worked creating all kinds of chemical products and pretty big chemical company here in the States. I'm working with bottlers that bottle juices and beverages. I work with companies that make paper. I even worked for a company that made high-tech medical devices, and that was my last corporate job that I have. That's taking me to work in a number of different settings with a number of different cultures. And like I said, one of the things that I wanted to do was this, travel, see the world, work with a lot of different people. And fortunately, I've been able to do that. In my assignments, things that I've been asked to do are, help optimize manufacturing processes, reducing defects, improving inventory turns, increasing, equipment uptime. I've set up a program management offices for companies. I helped integrate companies as they're being acquired, and merging the processes from one with the other, including all aspects, financial, IT, everything you can imagine. I've transitioned teams from waterfall, project management into an agile software development environment. So again, I think I've been pretty lucky in having all these assignments. And in case you guys are wondering what I'm pointing at in my lab coat here, it says temp. So I've been working temporarily in a lot of these areas. So to give you a little bit of a snapshot of my career, back in the early 2000s, I got my master black belt. I thought that was the rage back then, and it gave me some tools that I could really apply in helping organizations get better. Now, after a year or two maybe of doing that, I had the opportunity to be selected to be the group of people that did a lean implementation for a large company. And let me tell you, it was a life-changing experience there. Not only because I was able to grow my skill set and gain new skills through real implementation, big change management. But I also got the opportunity to be mentored by some of the people that had created what lean is, at least in the US. And one group that I was able to work with very closely is this group called Shingijutsu. And this is the company that helped export the deep knowledge of what the Toyota production system is outside of Toyota for companies like Boeing, like Porsche, and for a company that we're going to talk about today called Danaher. And if you're wondering what Shingijutsu means, that's a Japanese word, and it means new management technology. So they saw themselves as somebody that was, giving people new management technology. So for many years, Kaizen has been part of my career, part of my life, and it's been very rewarding. I've had the privilege to work with a number of different people tackling very difficult problems to solve. I've been part of more than 200 Kaizen events, driving big improvements and quick change. And you can see some examples here, back when I had darker hair and was a little thinner. So want to talk in my presentation about two companies that have a lot of history with Kaizen, and their history is intertwined with it. They're definitely exponents of what it is to have a Kaizen mindset. One of these companies is Danaher, and the other company is Toyota. So I'm gonna use a little bit of this time to go into a little bit of the history. I know it helps me to understand where things came from, to understand, what something really is. So let's talk a little bit about the history of Toyota. So if you didn't know, Toyota was actually a textile machinery manufacturer. It was something that the founders of Toyota started in the 1800s, but the company wasn't really formed as a formal company until 1926. It was actually called Toyota Automatic Loom Works. And it was built by a person called Sakichi Toyota with a D. And to this day, they still produce textile machinery and textile products that they use in their automotive products. Now, the success that they had initially with these looms put them in a spot where the owner of the company convinces dad to say, hey, why don't we get into this car making industry that was all the rage, back in the 20s and 30s. At that time, Ford Motor Company was, one of the leaders in that industry. So in 1936, their first commercial vehicle came out of the automobile department of the Toyota Spinning and Weaving Company. Now, from those, early beginnings, and after, overcoming some, huge difficulties after, Japan was decimated in World War II, it took them 70 years, but they went from a company that was completely destroyed to the leader, the largest automobile manufacturer in the world. And that's something pretty remarkable. And now, to overcome all those difficulties that they experienced, they developed a way of working that allowed them to achieve this. And this is called the Toyota Production System. And we're going to discuss some of it today. At the core of the Toyota Production System, there's this concept of Kaizen and a Kaizen mindset. And that's, one of the things we're going to discuss today. The other company that we want to talk about is this company called Danaher. It's an American company, and it's very impressive, their background. It was a company started by two brothers that inherited some money, and they started to purchase real estate property. They had a real estate investment trust that they used to, purchase real estate, properties, and they started purchasing manufacturing facilities, and they turned into that kind of business. So before I go on with Danaher, let's talk a little bit about Jacobs Manufacturing Company. And if you've ever been on the highway, maybe if you go to the mountain skiing and you can hear trucks go down the hill, you're gonna hear a noise when they're using engine braking. So those engine brakes are called Jake brakes. And there was a company that had invented that here in the States, and there was a point at which their patents had expired, and they were facing all kinds of competition. So they were really struggling. So the guy that was running the company, his name is George Koenigsegger. In 1988, he had been exposed to some of the Japanese management methodologies, and he heard there were some people from ex-Toyota that were going to be giving a speech at Hartford University, and they went to see that speech. Now, at the end of the talk, they stayed there and talked with Mr. Iwata and Mr. Nakao, and they basically begged them to come to their facility and show them how could they implement some of these things that Toyota was doing in their facilities. And it's usual, Japanese consultant way. They say, no, we're not going to help you because you're not going to do what we ask you to do. And they begged and they say, okay, listen, let's do this. Okay. They went out for dinner, by the way. So I guess this must have happened after a few cups of wine or sake. And they told them, listen, we'll go to your facility, okay, and we'll tell you what to do. But if you have not done it by the morning, we will never come back. So they went to the facility, and by 5 a.m. the next morning, they had transformed a manufacturing cell. So that started the relationship of Shingijutsu with this American company that's been going on for decades by now. So the work that they did at Jake Brake were the first examples of Japanese style Kaizen in America. So now, a little bit later on, the Rails brothers, they acquire a group of manufacturing companies that includes Jake Brake. They go and meet George, they see what he's doing in the factory, and they're completely impressed with the levels of productivity they've been able to drive by doing some of these techniques that they learn off of these ex-Toyota people. And they say, you know what? You need to present this at our next corporate meeting so that we can do this in our other factories. And this was the birth of the Danaher business system. Since then, this is the late 80s, maybe early 90s, Danaher has been using this Danaher business system. And Danaher has become what you would call a company that builds companies. In their recent history, and I was working for Danaher when this happened, they spun off parts of their business, not little parts of the business. I mean, these are multi, billion-dollar corporations that got spun off, like Fortive in 2016 and Envista in 2019, which was their dental company's dental platform. And actually, Fortive last year, they spun out another company from them. So they all have the same DNA, right? And there's still a core Danaher company that is still a $22 billion company that keeps growing that core business at a rate of 5% a year. It's a tremendous company. They own 24 companies that fall under the Danaher umbrella. Here's some of them, and I bet that you probably are not familiar with most of them, okay? Because the business that they do is that they do business to business. So even though you have not been part of this, your life has definitely been impacted by this. When you remember at the beginning of the COVID situation, and they started to look for ways to do testing quickly. Well, Cepheid, this company here, which they acquired while I was working for Danaher, was one of the companies that developed a 15-minute COVID test. And when they decoded the genome for COVID, they used some of the equipment that these companies create. I think including this one, which is IDT. That's a new acquisition, integrated DNA technology. So, I think Danaher was lucky that they were able to acquire these companies before, we had this COVID situation, and now, they're reaping the benefits from it. So Danaher is a company that builds companies. So what they do is that they acquire somebody and they build this operational excellence that it surpasses other companies in their space. They don't see themselves as a conglomerate like other companies or a holding company like private equity would. They see themselves as an operator of businesses. So each one of these companies works pretty much independently. And what Danaher provides is the guidance or the model that they can use to drive their performance significantly. To the point where the ex-CEO of Danaher, he had retired already, he got tapped to go lead the transformation of General Electric. So General Electric, that big, huge company, is now has an ex-Danaher head who's leading the lean transformation for General Electric. So why is this? Why should we be talking about this company? Why should we, find something to admire out of these guys? Why would this company be different than any other successful companies? So here's 3 quotes I want to share with you guys. It came from publications, right? So the Wall Street Journal says, this is the best stock over the last 30 years. Kiplinger says, this is the best stock in the District of Columbia. The Motley Fool says, Danaher is one of the big winners for COVID-19 for some of the things that I shared with you guys. So this is something that they definitely stand over a lot of companies because of the success that they've had in driving their performance. So one of the things I wanted to share with you guys is, how stark the contrast is between Danaher and other companies. So, I'm going to tell you, if you had $10,000 to invest 30 years ago, and you had bought some Apple stock, I'm sure you would be proud of your investment, because I certainly would be. Because now you'd be sitting on almost 10 million bucks in your account. That's not a bad return, right? But now, what would have happened is if those $10,000 you would have put it into Danaher instead. This is what would have happened. You would have almost $18 million. That's nearly twice as much as Apple. So this is definitely an outlier, right? So I think that it merits understanding a little better of what they do. So I think this is what makes the difference, okay? So Danaher has this thing, and Tom Joyce, his CEO, says that this is their secret sauce. The secret sauce is the tools, the processes, and the powers of the Danaher business system. And if the Danaher business system is the secret sauce, the main part of the secret sauce is Kaizen. So here's how they do what they do. they start a company that has a certain level of performance, and they set a really high bar and said, hey, over the next 3 years, your goal is to be performing at this level over here. So when you're tasked with these very stretched goals, you say that's not possible, right? But what they do is they manage to maintain what you're currently doing by continuing to do daily management in a certain way. And then they pile on top of that improvements coming from Kaizen event activities, daily Kaizen, as well as strategy deployment, some special projects that add additional capabilities to the organization. But then you could degrade back to where you were before, but what they do is they do a good job at using daily management to maintain what they already did. And they just repeat the process. More Kaizen, more strategy deployment, they're at a new level. They continue doing that. And over the course of a few years, now you're performing day in and day out at a totally new level. And this is what they do to every one of their organizations. They teach them how to do the daily management, how to do Kaizen, how to do strategy deployment. And that's how they drive that level of performance. So one of the things that I want to do is, talk a little bit about, what lean is. So I think I have a poll, Neilu, about this. What are some words that
Correct.
Yeah. Can we run that poll real quick?
Yeah, we can run that for sure.
Thank you. Definitely, a lot of this is part of lean. Definitely reduction of waste. Yeah, there's always ways to go after. Okay. All right. And they keep coming.
Yeah, just let me know.
How many people we got on the call?
46.
Okay. All right. Yes, all of these. So let's dive in a little bit more on what lean is. Hopefully, I can shed some light on that subject. So let's take a look at this, I think. All right. So some of the concepts did not start at Toyota. Some of the concepts of lean manufacturing, but they were definitely adopted. So let's go back to the beginning of the previous century, right? In 1914. The benefits of the concept of continuous flow were evident in Ford's facilities. On one end of the facility, you would see these big boats coming in with iron ore or with rubber from South America. And on the other end of the factory, you would see these cars roll off, and they would do absolutely everything, and nothing would really stop for any period of time. They had a really smooth flow throughout the factory, right? In the 30s, in Germany, they figured out that it was better for the facility for all the different workstations to be coordinated at a certain pace, so that these airplanes that were used, in the future, the war, they were built at a certain pace. So again, those concepts of flow. In the 50s, Toyota started taking these ideas that they saw from different places and adding, their own concepts like Kanban, developing that idea to facilitate the flow through their facilities. And as I mentioned, in the 80s, these concepts started trickling in the States. We started using more and more of this into lean manufacturing. In the 90s, we had these researchers from MIT trying to define, hey, how does Toyota do this, and publish the machine that changed the world. And in 96, Womack published a book called Lean Thinking, in which he explained how to implement this lean thinking into your own business. And that's where you have, I'm sure some of you have heard those concepts of identify customer value, identify value streams, create flow, create pool, and then perfect. So those 5 steps, they came out of that, lean thinking book, in an attempt to try to define, hey, how do we implement lean in our operations? Okay. Now, if you want to walk away with, a better understanding of the really important parts of lean from one slide, this is it. Okay. So this is the things that you believe in if you believe in lean, right? People are your most important asset, and respect them. And there's a lot of things that go around this, like, working through teams and how you work through teams. It's not going to be the technical, the technical aspects of solutions that are going to give you the biggest benefit. It's how people work together. Because anybody can buy, a computer or a robot or a piece of equipment for their operation, but few people can get a group of people together to work in a certain way to accelerate their performance. So that's a very important part of Lean and at the core of what Toyota does. The other thing is the concept of value creation, right? Understanding what a customer values and then maximizing the value creation by creating flow, right? And if you're good at creating flow, what you're going to do is you're going to end up working on waste in the form of unnecessary things, unnecessary steps, excess motion, excess transportation, anything where we are overburdened or the burden is uneven. It comes, in different ways, and looking for this waste in every business process. So ultimately, your gauge on how good you are at Lean is how good is your flow of work, okay? The last two concepts that I have here is one is to go and see for yourself. There's no better way to gain information than to go to the real place and observe for yourself. And then with the respect for people, try to understand where they're coming from and how the way of operating is. And finally, Kaizen. Kaizen is at the core of Lean. It's one of the most important concepts in Lean. If you want to walk away now, at least you capture these things. This is really very important in terms of Lean. Now, if we want to review Lean from a more pragmatic approach and more more graphical way of representing it, I want you to think of everything that you guys do from the time you start your workday, right? As soon as you arrive at work, there's a lot of things that you guys do, in terms of, meeting with people and in terms of analyzing information and communicating and doing a lot of things. For the people that I end up working with, a lot of times, they're bending metal or they're forming things with plastic and all those things. Think of all those activities that you do plus everybody else that works in the organization and put them into this blue circle, okay? Now, out of all those things, only some of those activities are what we consider to be value added. And there's a specific definition on how you are, allowed or not to be in this yellow circle. And you can see that there's a ratio between this blue circle and the small circle, right? Now, what Lean implementation does is that you focus on reducing or eliminating everything that's considered non-value added so that you have a more beneficial ratio between the non-value added activities and the value added activities. So in a Lean transformation, this is what you do, okay? Now, why would you do this? For the following reason. You pick anything that that you're involved with. Let's say maybe it's launching of a new product or taking an idea and taking it from a concept all the way to commercialization, or maybe it is how long it takes you to fulfill an order in a warehouse, or turn raw materials into finished goods, or developing the hardware for a new product, or even when you go get your car serviced in the express lane at the Ford dealership, okay? Everything that people does is a series of steps. So if we take those steps and we measure how long they take, they give you the lead time for that process. But then if we take those steps of the process and we go through this thing called a value, non-value added analysis, and we take each step and say, okay, out of this process, this is value added, and this is not value added. This is value added, this is not value added. This is value added, this is not. And do that for every one of the steps. And we can segment those two. And then the next step, we say, let's eliminate or reduce all the non-value added activity. What's going to happen, in this case, to make it easy and easier to illustrate, I've eliminated the non-value added altogether. Now, in real life, that might take years, or you might never be able to reach that, but you definitely create a big impact on those magenta sections. What you're left with is only the value-added activities. So when you put them from step 1 to step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in this case, and you butt them up together, now you have a totally different lead time, much shorter lead time. So what happens is that you drastically reduce it, and that gives you capabilities that your competition does not have. So now you're competing against them in terms of time, and you can turn that capability, the new capability, into whatever you want. You can use it to gain additional market share, to basically take away customers from your competitors, to raise prices, but with the same level to raise prices for faster service. You can charge more for a faster service, or you can lower your prices, but now you have lower costs. So now you have the same profitability but a lower cost. So you're competing with price, or you can improve your cash flow. You can get paid way before you had before, and you can use that cash to do things with it. You can do a lot of different things. I mean, the sky's the limit, and that's why companies do it. That's why Danaher does it. It dramatically improves their cash flow position, and this allows them to have that money to go buy a new company and basically take over those sales that company was doing. So this is the concept of lean, okay, and lean thinking. This is what you do in different organizations. This is what I've done for a lot of different people. So now this has cultural aspects, and I wanna share that with you guys. This might be a point where we could take some questions, and we might put some of those into the parking lot. Does anybody have a question that we can put on the chat? If you guys have a question, because right now we're still going to talk about some conceptual things, but right now we've explained what lean is. Any questions?
I want to know, how much stock did you have in Danaher?
How much what?
Stock.
How much stock? Yeah, it was nice, but my stint with Danaher was short. So over that short period of time, I was with them for a little over 2 years. I did have some stock that I still have, and it's done pretty nicely. And but prior to Danaher, I had also purchased some stock. So that's definitely one of the components that they use to entice you to stay in the company and definitely go work for them. Good question. What else?
Ricardo, so in your previous slide, so we've got a lot of folks that have Kanban background, right?
Yeah.
And so they're used to like lead time, cycle time. So how does that relate, Kanban, to some of what you did before in the previous slide?
Well, I mean, I still use it, right? I mean, that's a concept that we do. So for manufacturing facilities, anytime that you're not able to flow for different reasons, maybe it's something where the lead time, it has to go out of the facility, or it has to go somewhere, and you don't have enough lead time to go, then you need a buffer that'll carry you through that period of time. But now you don't want to leave that buffer indefinite, right? So that anybody can hold material or information or whatever. So what you do is you cap it using Kanbans. Now, the application where you start to use it for software development is somewhat similar, where you don't want to have an indefinite amount of work in your pipeline. You want to cap it. So that's how you start using Kanbans to say, hey, these are all the things that we're going to have in the pipeline, and until we get some of those out, you're not going to put new ones in. I don't know if that helps a little bit with that concept. So believe it or not, you know where that concept of Kanban came from, or at least this is the lore. Have you heard that story?
Isn't it the story with the Japanese shops in the medieval times that all had those boards?
No,
I think it was the American supermarket.
Yes, Piggly Wiggly. We don't have a whole lot of those in Florida, but we definitely have some of those in Georgia. Do they have those in Charlotte? Do they have Piggly Wigglies in Charlotte?
I haven't heard of it.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, it's a supermarket chain. So when these guys came to the States, the concept of the supermarket was just getting started, and they certainly didn't have that in Japan. And when they came to the States and saw how the supermarkets work here, they realized, how amazing it is that when somebody pulls the last basically bottle of ketchup off the shelf, there is a card there that they use to replenish it. So they took that back and used that as a countermeasure for how do I instruct people in my factory to bring me material without me having to go over there and tell them, right? So they used a formal way of communicating, which was that Kanban card. I don't know if there's any other questions. So let's talk a little bit about the culture behind Lean the Kaizen. I think it's important to understand, where does this, in terms of culture, the culture aspect of it, because that's what makes it stick. So, back in the 30s, Toyota had to define for their people, hey, what are going to be our principles? And, Sakichi Toyoda at that time, he said, okay, well, these are the 5 principles we're going to live by. And this is the list of them. Always be faithful to your duties, always be studious and creative, always be practical and avoid frivolousness. But the one I want you guys to look at is this one. Always be studious and creative, right? Striving to stay ahead of the times. So always be looking to, how can I change? How can I drive improvement? Fast forward a few years, 1992, again, Toyota has to release a new version of the guiding principles. Let's focus in on this one. Foster a corporate culture that enhances both individual creativity, again, creativity forms a part there, right? And the value of teamwork while honoring mutual trust and respect between labor management. Again, these are all little bits of aspects that shape that Kaizen mindset. Fast forward 2001, Toyota publishes this thing called the Toyota Way to help people follow their guiding principles. And I want you guys to notice that at that time, they were way more explicit. They actually call out Kaizen is one of the 5 components of our Toyota Way. And they use this for all their, I don't even remember how many people they had in the organization at that period of time in the 2000s, right? So Kaizen is at the core and part of the culture at Toyota. Now, not to be outdone, we had some researchers trying to, decipher what Toyota was doing and share it with the organizations in the States. So in 2004, Jeffrey Liker publishes this book. And by the way, if you're interested in this is a pretty decent book. Even better, there's an activity book that you can take the concepts in this book and actually find direct application of them. So he publishes this book that has, he has synthesized what the Toyota Way into 14 principles. And notice the last one that I have here, which is become a learning organization through relentless reflection, in Japanese Hansei, and continuous improvement, Kaizen. So definitely a part of what Toyota does. So Kaizen at the core of what Toyota does, very successful company. Kaizen at the core of what Danaher does. In fact, they when they published their core values, and we actually, as a DBS leader, I had to memorize, this whole thing so that we can explain it to people. They say, this beautifully. Kaizen is our way of life. And let me tell you, they really believe it. I mean, Kaizen is part of their daily life at Danaher, and it does make a huge difference. Now, most of the stuff shouldn't be foreign to a lot of you, because when Sutherland defined the Scrum process, Scrum technique, one of the things that they baked in was this concept of Kaizen when you do the retros, right? So you're always asking, what is that change that we can start on today, right? That will make our next sprint better. So that is part of Kaizen. So, I believe the majority of you have been introduced, probably use this on the daily basis. And it's very important not just to do it with our team, but teach others and how to adopt this, because that's only going to make the organizations a lot more powerful. Okay. So now let's talk specifically about the concept of Kaizen. What is Kaizen? So Kaizen is it's a compound Japanese word that means change and good. These are the symbols for change and good. And you can go deeper and understand what this one means, and it means self, and this one means whip, and but really what they were trying to do is you change for the better. Okay. And some people attribute a continuous improvement to be the same kind of thinking, right? Drive continuous improvement of the self, drive continuous improvement of your team, drive continuous improvement in your organization. So some key parts of the mindset are these 3 things. In terms of adaptability, the thing that you need to keep in mind is that change is good, and you need to be open for change, and you need to have an open mind at all. This was one of the first things that the Japanese senseis would be aware of. If you would answer their questions with yes, but they would not like to work with you, and they would come really hard on you, actually. And that's the reason why they didn't want to work with Quantifying back in the 80s, because they thought that, you know, they wouldn't have an open mind for change, because these changes that are required sometimes are not intuitive, and it's difficult to make some of these changes. The other thing that's really important from having a Kaizen mindset is that search for perfection, right? You know, do not become complacent. Even though you get to a certain level, keep pushing for more. There is always room for improvement. And lastly is this part of respect for people, right? A lot of times we find faults in organizations doing work that's really wasteful. And Taiichi Ono, that was, you know, one of the, you could consider him to be the father of Toyota production system, even considered this to be detrimental to society. So it was people's responsibility in organization to drive out waste, because you were hurting society, because you were wasting the people in the organization. So these things are all intertwined, obviously, in the Kaizen mindset, but they form very, very important parts. So why would we need a Kaizen mindset? For one, despite what a lot of organizations try to do, you can't really predict the future. There's too much uncertainty. So instead of doing that, instead of putting your energy trying to forecast things and trying to predict things, just like we do with the, you know, waterfall type of approach to projects, what you want to do is you want to, you know, create your future by identifying next target conditions, right? Conditions that you're going to drive deliberately towards, and you make your future as you go. Okay. The other thing that's important about, you know, why we need this Kaizen mindset is because it affords us the opportunity to experiment. Because there's always a continuous improvement train after this one, I know that if I experiment and I fail, I'm going to have another opportunity to make it better right after this one. So that really accelerates the development in organizations. You know, when your people are not scared of making mistakes, because we have this culture of continuous improvement, and you can, you know, have another chance at it. That's really important, and why we need to drive this Kaizen mindset in your organization. And finally, the other thing is, a lot of times organizations, and again, I'm a master black belt in Six Sigma, you know, what I was taught back then is you got to look for a solution. And in order to look for the solution, you got to do all this analysis before you try something. And you need to be careful with that, because sometimes that can slow you down. You know, organizations that have a Kaizen mindset versus somebody that's, you know, maybe too analytical, maybe has some paralysis, you know, by analysis. What a Kaizen mindset does is it gives you opportunities to improve. Yes, they're not going to be huge improvements, but the fact that you're continuously driving improvement is going to get you ahead of those other organizations. So this is why we want to have this, you know, mentality of Kaizen. And so with that in mind, you know, how do you execute based on a Kaizen mind? What kind of actions would you see if somebody is, you know, working with a Kaizen mindset? For one, you would see people looking for every opportunity to improve. You know, it doesn't matter what level of performance you're at, you're driving for better. The other thing is that you have people that are more open for change. You know, you have people that are, you know, less anchored down in what you've been doing, good or bad. Okay. The other thing is it's a better place to work, because your approach should be, okay, let's first understand what's going on. Let me understand where they're coming from before I start, you know, making significant changes in that area. If you're not doing that, you're not doing Kaizen well. Some people do that, by the way, but you're not doing Kaizen well. The other thing is that you need to have a bias for action, right? You're going to see people having a bias for action, taking action. And this leaning forward that drives, you know, that comes from, you know, being continuously taking, you know, action, it really, you know, accelerates the improvements. You know, you can, you know, in terms of velocity for sprints, I mean, the first increment in velocity is X. And because you're continuing to take action and make changes, your next one is 2X. And it's an accelerating thing. That's why this is the reason why Toyota had no problem opening the doors for people to show them what they do, because they've been doing this for so long that there is no way that you would be able to catch up with them, because they have such a head start in terms of developing people's heads to drive additional improvement. And lastly, it's this concept of the power of the team, right? There's very few things that have been achieved in history that have been a one-man show. I mean, most of the things have been, by teams of people. So that's why, when you look at Agile, it's all about the team, right? So that's another important thing, that if you see these things, then you're working with this Kaizen mindset. So one of the things that you probably need to adopt is this concept of thinking of Kaizen as an improvement strategy, right? So you're thinking, well, how do I've been given this task, and now I have new goals, how am I going to get there? One of the things that you should consider is using Kaizen. This is a way that you can step up to a new level of performance. And that's, like I said before, this is definitely what Danaher does. Now, a lot of you guys probably have heard the word Kaizen, okay? But maybe you have not heard that Kaizen could mean different things. We can have daily Kaizen, or continuous Kaizen. You can have Kaizen events. So let's talk a little bit about daily Kaizen. Why do we want to talk about daily Kaizen first? Because this, in my opinion, is the more important one. And some of you guys have already been introduced into this idea based on the Agile work that you do. Because the objective here is to create a culture in which everybody is driving improvement daily, as opposed to just, managing to get through the day, basically maintaining what they already have. So what you're doing is expecting folks to identify problems, expecting folks also to provide ideas for these problems, and then implementing those ideas. And that's what you're doing. So Toyota takes it, again, to the next level, right? Over the course of 40 years, I think that this isn't published in a book. They have a good ideas program at Toyota. They actually measure it as a corporate metric. They were able to implement over the course of 40 years 20 million ideas, and they reward people in the organization for providing their ideas. And they have a metric for number of ideas implemented per person per month. So that gives you an idea of how seriously they take this concept of daily Kaizen at Toyota. And it's just a matter of identifying opportunities, going after them with ideas, and actually believing in the ideas of the people that are working the space. So the beauty of thinking of opportunities for Kaizen and everything is that anytime you encounter a difference between where you are and where you want to be, you can call that a problem. Could be a good problem, right? I currently don't know French, right? I would like to know French. That's my problem. So now I'm going to work on it, and through Kaizen, I'm going to get to that Kaizen, that change for the better. I'm going to get to that new target condition. So this concept of problems don't have a bad connotation. We should be looking for problems in and out every day. This is definitely something that companies that have a Kaizen mindset, it's embedded into their DNA. So if you're gonna have this daily Kaizen, what are some of the things that you need to make sure that take place? So in a place that's doing this right, ideas are expected. Okay, all ideas are reviewed. Now, some ideas are not implemented because you have some guardrails, right? But then after you've given feedback on the idea, and you do that quickly, all approved ideas are actually implemented. Now, this is done obviously with a PDCA approach. If you guys are familiar with this acronym, it stands for Plan, Do, Check, Act, which means that if it's not working, you're going to make an adjustment and you're going to do that again, right? So it's a Deming approach for solving problems. So you plan, then you do, then you see if you got the results you wanted, and then you make adjustments on the next iteration. So you implement all the ideas that you get, or implement all the approved ideas that you get. In terms of facilitating the process, so if you can picture yourself driving a Kaizen in your organization, one of the key things that you're going to want to do is you want to have a score. You want to have something that you can measure yourself against. If we're talking about agile teams, you might be looking at the velocity or the capacity of the team. If you're looking at manufacturing, you might be looking at how much can we ship per hour, or how many sales can we have per associate. So you got to have some score, right? And then what you're doing is you make sure that folks are looking at the score and identifying gaps. And then what you do is you prioritize based on trends and team input. Then you work on encouraging the ideas to come out. You don't judge them initially, right? You give people the chance to try them out. And you make sure that these guardrails are well communicated.
Also known as the C-suite of your company.
Sorry?
No, no worries. That was
Okay.
somebody that opened up their mic.
Okay, no problem. And you want to reward contributions, right? You know, folks need to know that this is something that's good for them and as well as the organization. And then what you do as a facilitator is you set the next target condition, right? You know, so you continue to encourage for people to see, you know, what is the next step? You know, not something that's too far away, but something that can be achieved over a period of time. Now, before I move on to the next slide, you know, what I'd like to ask is, you know, how many of you guys later, let's see if we can run a poll on this. So if you're driving daily Kaizen, rarely you would get a 1, sometimes yes, sometimes no, 3, the third choice, every day it's a 5. I'm curious, you know, this is such a you know, variety of folks in the call, you know, I think this should be interesting. Okay, all right. So here's you might see this as you know, maybe an opportunity to start to incorporate some of this. And honestly, it's not difficult to do, and people really appreciate it. So this week, you guys can see my background. This is not my house. So it's a hotel room. I'm in South Georgia, working with a company here, and we're actually doing a Kaizen event this week. And it's amazing how much more engaged folks are at the end of the Kaizen than they were at the beginning, because you provide people with the opportunity to shape their environment, to create their future, and it's a really rewarding experience, and it's not difficult to do. So it's not daily Kaizen that we're driving, but the opportunity to participate in this Kaizen event, you know, really helps people get more engaged with the organization, and that's really what you want to do, right? All right. Well, thank you for contributing to that. Do we have more? No, right? Okay. Let's see. So let's talk about the next, if you want to call it, type of Kaizen, right? So while Kaizen should happen every day, we should be driving Kaizen every day. There's these things that exist called Kaizen Events, and these are structured improvement activities. This is where a small cross-functional team dedicated full-time to solve a problem gets it done in 1 to 5 days, okay? If you want to think of it as, you know, I'm going to sequester this group of people, put them in a room, and they're going to solve this very difficult problem for us in the company. We're going to give them all the resources that they need to get it done. Let me tell you, this is big change and quick change and really impactful. And as I mentioned, I've done about 200 of these in my career, and it's a really an amazing approach. Now, is it tough? Absolutely. It's difficult, long days, you know, sometimes frustrating, sometimes there's friction. But if you're a good facilitator, you can also keep it fun. So what you do is you iterate through potential solutions, right? You put countermeasures in place, you measure what impact you had, you pivot from it, and you try things, and eventually you arrive at something that you can work with going forward. It's focused on identifying and eliminating waste from processes, you know, so you, in your scope, you define what area am I going to be working in, and this could be anything, any process in your company, you know, how you purchase things, you know, how you submit an engineering change, you know, what's the expectation on email responses, you know, whatever, pick whatever problem, and you grab a group of people, and then they solve it for a couple of days, within a couple of days. So how does it end? It ends with a new version of the standard work, a new way of, here's our preferred approach for doing this, okay? And then anything that they weren't able to finish in the 5 days, because usually there's things that you're just not able to do in those 5 days, it stays on what you call a newspaper, and those items, they get tracked over a period of 30 days, and then they get closed over 30 days. So even though they didn't get completed in those 5 days, within a month they're done. So if you do it well, that's kind of how it works. And let me tell you, I mean, it really accelerates, how companies, improve their operation. So let me tell you a little bit about, the typical structure of these events, right? There's a prep phase where you get things ready for the event. Then there's a discovery phase where you're looking at information, going to the real place. We call that a gemba. You're visiting with folks that are doing the work, getting them to understand where they're coming from, what their history is, what kind of tools they use for the job. Then with all that information, the team convenes to do an analysis of it. And based on that analysis, you develop a strategy. Okay, here's the things that let's go try. Then you try them out. Obviously, you measure them, and the ones you want to keep, you bake them into a standard work document, right? Here's how we're going to do this going forward. And that obviously that document gets communicated and trained with the rest of the stakeholder population. Obviously, you want to have a good group of your stakeholders inside of your Kaizen team. And then there's a closing phase and the follow-up phase. Why the follow-up phase? Because a lot of companies do Kaizen events. But if you look at them over a period of time, many times they degrade back to the same thing they were doing before the Kaizen event. So you need to have this, follow-up to make sure that the gains that you put in place are sustained over time. So it's a very deliberate approach on the follow-up. So just to give you a visual, how things work. So let's say we're going to do a 5-day event. There are, days that we have more activity and maybe longer days, and some days we have a little bit less activity and they're a little bit, more relaxed. So day one on a Monday, we would do the introductions, we would do the charter review, we would understand what the scope is, what the objective, how are we going to measure success, etc. We would go do these things called Gemba walks, which is nothing more than go to the place where whatever you're working on happens, the real place. Then what you do is you do some process mapping and understand how is it currently being done, and you document it so that you have it on the wall and you can start to understand, how are people interacting in them. You might do some time studies. You might take measurements. Then you do some root cause analysis maybe, and some brainstorming of potential actions that we can take, and we start planning what actions we're going to take. Now Tuesday, you finish discovery. You do finish the analysis activities. Maybe you do some 5S if you guys are familiar with 5S. Maybe you do some future state mapping, but now we start to generate the ideas. We start to try storm these ideas. We start to do prototypes. We, thinking in terms of like minimum viable product. What's the minimum that will prove our hypothesis that this is a better way to do it? And you start doing that over the course of Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. So Thursday, you start wrapping up these things and you start the process of developing the standard work that's going to help you keep things working the way that you let them initially. And then on Friday, what you do is you finish your documentation and then you communicate it to the bigger organization, letting them know, hey, going forward, this is how we're going to operate. And that's a typical Kaizen event. And I'll tell you a little bit, I can tell you later a little bit of the history of how this came to be, okay? And it has a lot to do with having these guys from Japan coming just for a week before they move on somewhere else. But then this, this is very typical. A lot of companies have this approach, so I wanted to share that with you guys. Another less typical approach is the following. So what you do is over a prep period, you collect a lot of the data. So, you do the Gemba walks, you take pictures, you take videos, you document the, process mapping, and you do a SIPOC for the operation. You gather customer requirements, not to the lengths that you guys are probably get allergies when you see them. There are books, but just get a sense for what is important to the customer. If we were to develop a solution, what would be some important things that they would be looking for in the solution? And then what you do is you do the analysis of it. So then your first few days, what you're doing is you're validating the root cause analysis done, get everybody to understand what you're trying to achieve, agree on the scope, develop a potential action plan, and you start to try storm some of these solutions. You start to develop these prototypes, put them in play, make sure that you can start getting some data from them and how they work. You leave a period, we call that an intersession, in which during that time, your prototype is working, is running, is giving you information, and then you come back for a second, basically, set of Kaizen days where you basically button up everything that you started with. You improve the things that you saw that weren't working, you kill some things that didn't work at all, and you keep the things that you like. And obviously at the end, what you want to do is you want to document your standard work as the new way of doing things, and then reward and recognize folks, okay? So this is, a little bit less typical, but you do see that out there in the field, okay? So how do you put one of these together? So some of the things that you might want to think of is you got to think of a pressing business issue. If you're going to pull these people together and sequester them and give them all the resources, you can't be working on somebody's pet project. It's got to be something that's really getting in the way of the organization. Then what you want to do is you want to spend some time exposing and quantifying the gap, right? So it's easy to communicate to folks, what is this business gap? What is the impact of us fixing this? So you can sell your event to folks. So you gather the support that you need from leadership, and you confirm that there is alignment between this event and the business objectives. That's going to give you a lot of resources to work with. Where right now you're thinking like, hey, we have to live with this issue. If you're able to present a really good ROI, people will give you the time and resources to get it done. Then before you get started, you want to identify, who's going to be impacted by these changes, and understand, are they supportive or not supportive? And then take that into account when you're putting together your core team and you sell folks on this event for their resources, for their participation, for their support, whatever you need, right? And then you go through the, typical logistics, it's just like scheduling it, send the Outlook invitations, getting the material supplies together, getting additional information that you need for the event, making sure that, who's going to be attending on what days and who's going to be part of the report out, putting together the agenda. And then this whole prep part ends when you're actually holding the event. All right, that's a lot of information. So I don't know if I want to stop before move on to the other one, to what maybe the meat of holding the event. I have a few slides on putting the team together. It might be still prep, but is there any questions at this point in time?
Yeah. Asking if you have any recommended websites on Kaizen events or resources that they can look up.
Yeah, there's definitely. I probably can send you a list of them. Some of them, the Lean Enterprise Institute is an organization in the States that helps drive the lean deployment across organizations. Another group is the Association of Manufacturing Excellence, AME. So it's ame.org. That's another organization that promotes this kind of activity in the US. Another organization is, I think they changed their name, the Gemba Academy has a really good blog. So anyway, I got a big list. I can give you guys, we can post it at the Agile group, and you guys can dig in and learn a lot more, from that.
Awesome.
Any other ones?
We got 10 minutes left for
okay.
the event. So
let me fly through real quick. Okay. So here's, you're faced with putting a Kaizen event together. First thing you're going to do, you're going to put yourself as the team leader. And now you got to pull people from different parts of the organization. But who do you pull? First, you got to think about, okay, I'm going to have a core team and an extended team. The extended team, we got to have people from a number of different areas. So who am I going to pull from QC and from blah, blah, blah? Different organizations, you pull them into a core team. You don't want to have a big core team. 5 to 7 is a good size. I think ideally, just like in Scrum, you want to have, 7 plus or minus 2, I think is the rule of thumb. And then after that, these guys are going to be together sequestered with you. They can go out to their part of the organization and reach out to folks in those areas if you need to, right? But you don't have to schedule all these guys. All you have to schedule is those, 5 to 7 folks. And then you have a presentation with the big organization so you can have, all your stakeholders aware of the changes that you made. So in terms of facilitating, things to keep an eye on are having a clear objective, having a good agenda, doing good graphical analysis, having good ground rules, typical things that you would do for an event. And I can help you guys one-on-one with any of these things. Of course, driving Kaizen in organizations gets you to face with these kind of things, like people thinking, hey, why are we doing this? We don't have time to do this. If it's not broken, don't fix it. We're different. I don't understand, yeah, but, all these things are cultural challenges. But let me tell you, you have one good event, you're going to put all these detractors to shame. So, so I highly encourage you guys to consider this for your organization. Now, in the Agile Manifesto, you have something that says at regular intervals, the team reflect on how you did, then tune and adjust your behavior accordingly, right? So this is part of the DNA of the Agile methodology, right? So if you're wondering whether this is something that you can use in your organization, think about those issues that you live with, organizational silos, how management prioritizes projects, how do they assign resources, how, why do people have deficient project management practices, how do people, take so long to drive decisions? All these things are prime targets for you to go after with a Kaizen mindset and a Kaizen approach. Okay, so with that, I'm no more blah blah blah. so hopefully that's a lot of information, but but hopefully that's been useful, to you guys. So I'm open for questions.
So wow, this is awesome. We've got room for two questions.
Sorry guys, I talked too much.
No, this is great. Any questions? Anybody jump in? Do you have a question?
Yeah, I've got a question. This is Bill Sherman. Ricardo, thank you very much for your time. This has been fantastic. For me personally, I've always looked at how to make companies more efficient. Being from an IT perspective, most of the time it's either an IT solution or an operational solution, and most of the time companies aren't interested in doing formal processes, formal analysis like you do. Yeah. So what can we do from a more informal perspective, and what tools can we use to do those with?
So one of the things that we talked about was having that daily Kaizen, right? So daily Kaizen is a little bit more than just having an employee suggestion system, right? But what you do is you start to enable your team and the people that you work with to say, hey guys, what are some areas that if we would change, it would make us more productive? That's a question that any manager can do, any manager in any part of the organization, and then go through a process where you formally document the ideas of folks, and then implement those ideas and see how they work. So you run little experiments all the time. You don't have to boil the ocean, but if we had indefinite amount of time, we could probably boil the ocean, right? So you just give yourself a lot of opportunities to drive incremental improvements that would help people feel like they're more they have more control of their process, their part of the organization. I don't know if that helps.
And what kind of it does a little bit. How about tools? What kind of tools could we use that maybe not more semi-formal or less than formal processes?
Tools like in the shape of driving daily Kaizen. One of the tools that you might,
or just in general, documentation of processes and
looking for inefficiencies. Solutions.
Correct.
There's a few out there, and obviously now there's more. Process mapping is a huge thing, but now that we're quickly moving into rapid robotic process automation, there are tools out there that help you document processes initially just for understanding what people do, but then you can quickly turn that into a technology solution that automates the process once we come up with the best way to do it. So I think as UiPath has a pretty good tool to do that. So there are tools out there, for example, for process mapping, but it could be as simple as, just getting together with a group of people and using formal process mapping approach, mapping out a process, from a start to stop. Value stream mapping is somewhat similar, right? It's a different level of detail. You use a little bit different approach, but that's another methodology, another tool that you can use to identify what are the biggest areas of opportunity for a specific operation or a specific groups of operations in a company.
Great, thank you.
Very good. Ricardo, I don't even know what to say. For me, this was personally very informative. I was looking forward to this topic. Ricardo and I used to work together in at the chemical manufacturing company.
Making chemicals, right?
And we used to have to do the inventory. We had to, once a quarter, we had to volunteer actually do inventory count.
You probably remember that day I did not show up because I told him my life is to get rid of this stuff, so I'm not going to help you count it. But yes, I remember. Poor you. You had to get involved with that effort. That was tough.
Yeah, that was fun. But I'm very excited to have had you here to speak to our.
Welcome.
This was an extremely informative topic. Guys, Ricardo Villeda, he's on LinkedIn. If anybody wants to reach out to him, or you can put your information in the chat. But feel free to him on LinkedIn as well. Any last minute words on the Kaizen mindset that you'd like to leave us with?
Just go and do it. Just try it out. Keep the scope manageable for you because we are maybe at different levels in the organization, and just try it out. I mean, think about the tool of Kanban. Start with a personal Kanban, right? Your project work, your stuff, put one behind the door in your office.
It's interesting because, we're Agilists and the origins of Agile come from Lean and Kaizen, right? Yeah. So a lot of what we're hearing from you is a lot of what we work with every day that we implement in Agile with our teams, the mindset and the implementation part of it.